Welcome to Movies That Matter, the podcast that goes beyond basic film criticism to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm Nicole Finari, and with me today is...
Stacy Moore!
Woohoo! Back! I'm gonna get to do this several more times, which is really fun.
Okay.
So, what movie are we overanalyzing today?
Let me see if I can do this properly. Good luck to you, Leo Grande.
Nice.
Thank you.
So in Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, two-time Academy Award winner Emma Thompson embodies the candor and apprehension of retired teacher Nancy Stokes, and newcomer Daryl McCormack personifies the charisma and compassion of sex worker Leo Grande. As Nancy embarks on a post-marital sexual awakening and Leo draws on his skills and charm, together they find a surprising human connection. What did you think?
Delightful! I thought it was just delightful. The two of them are so sweet together. I thought that they paired together really well in a really unexpected way. It was the characters were complex. It didn't go any of the places I thought it was going to go. It tackled things sometimes a little too explicitly, like, you know, in the dialogue, but most of the time really tackling issues in a subtle, you know, undertone kind of way. And I liked them both and I wanted good things for them, but when they screwed up, I was like, that was a screw up. And you need to make that right. And when they made it right, it was really satisfying. And I just had such a great time.
Yeah, I agree. I also found it enjoyable. I definitely, I didn't know how they were going to come back. Her portrayal was so enormous and so out of line that I just felt like, the movie's clearly not over. Like, where are we going to go with this? So I definitely was like, I was glad it wasn't as predictable as I thought it was going to be. There was a breach that needed to be repaired, and I thought it was repaired well. So kudos to them for taking a storyline that could have been very rote. Yeah,
it was, the performances were just lovely. It was all the things you like about a stage play, but with all the advantages of filmmaking, right? All the close-ups and, quiet, close moments that you can't really get from the back row of an audience.
Yeah.
But with the same sort of intimacy and, like, bare bones minimalism of a stage play, of a 4-act stage play.
Yeah, I will say, though, like, had this been a play when they finally did get more explicit, like, that is very uncomfortable sometimes when you're in a theater. Like, the screen definitely helps keep you a separation as an audience member. Like, I know that violence and sex in the theater is always a lot more impactful. But I think, like, if Emma Thompson, who I have loved forever, all the credit in the world to her, but I mean, I think the movie hinged on how good Leo's performance was, and he was perfection.
He's a doll.
Yeah.
Right? Now, do you remember 2 years ago, at the beginning of the pandemic, I texted you and our other pod friends all together, and I said, out of the blue, this guy, Daryl McCormack, is going to be a star.
I don't.
Yeah.
What was it? What was he on what was he in that you saw him in?
I think he was in a trailer. I had seen a trailer for a small Irish film that I couldn't find playing anywhere. The only thing he's known for is being a very peripheral character in Peaky Blinders.
Right.
But I saw him in this trailer and I saw those eyes.
Yeah.
And his energy, and I just went, that guy. The only other time I've had this feeling was about a 2001 Chris Evans.
Really?
In a preview showing of Not Another Teen Movie.
Okay. Nice.
So I was like, and then 2 years went by, and I didn't see Daryl McCormack in anything, and I was like, I guess maybe I was off, but I think he might come back.
Yeah, I mean,
this is it.
He was like the perfect blend of, like, this is, you know, when we've like sort of dissected rom-coms, like rom-com actors need to be sort of like approachably attractive.
Mm-hmm.
They can't be so attractive that you're like, why would this person ever be single for 5 seconds, right?
Yes.
Like that's, you know, like they have to hit that like girl next door prettiness or whatever. And I would say he's like very attractive, but not so attractive that you're like, you know, he could just pick up a sugar mama. Like, why even do this, you know?
Oh, no, I do not see that. I think he's stunning. I think he's too stunning to be in a rom-com most of the time.
Interesting.
So that's just a difference of taste, I'm sure. But I agree with you that like that is something that I think worked. At least it wouldn't be needed for a rom-com normally, but I think worked here because you had to believe that someone would pay money.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Right?
No, that's fair. But he had a, and I think again, it's divorcing the looks themselves from the performance. He had such an approachable energy. And just that little hint of an Irish accent was like perfect for the character as well. Somehow it made you feel more at ease, obviously, than if he had like a really strong English accent, because then you're like, is he a Nazi? You know, like it's like all our stereotypes about actors with English accents come into play. Right. And you're secretly worried he's going to kill her, right?
Right.
So
no, it's disarming.
Yeah, that's the perfect word, disarming. His entire performance was so disarming, and that's what the character needed to be. And she comments on how like he always knows the right thing to say, and he does. Like he reads her moods really well. He knows when to push and when to back off. But I just thought like I was like, this is every woman's fantasy. Like every woman would be all about this dude, and I was just so impressed with how well he played that character.
Yeah, he really carried it. He really just carried that. It required someone, an individual who could really just like bring the magnetism and the charm, but also, like you say, be completely easy and pleasant and not non-threatening. Non-threatening is a funny word, but yeah.
Well, yeah, non-threatening. You're in a very vulnerable position.
For sure. And apparently they, to your point about the kind of the intimacy being very scary in person, or just, whatever in person, apparently the director, did you read this? The director, in the first rehearsals of the intimate scenes, she got naked with them.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that.
In this very methodical way, right? In a very, just like, we're all going to take off this, and then we're all going to take off this. And then when they were all naked, all three of them, then they started rehearsing the intimate scenes. And they did not use an intimacy coordinator. So, yeah, and this is something I think we've all suddenly learned about through the sort of high-profile firing of Frank Langella.
Like as to what an intimacy coordinator is as a role in a scene. I'm like, one just wonders how do you get that job? Like, I'm like, what are your I'm sure they're all qualified and good at it, but I'm just like, how do you get to be that person?
How do you major in that?
Yeah, like inquiring minds want to know, but that's neither here nor there. But like when you hear about it and it's somebody who, exactly as it sounds like, right, like makes sure the actors know what they're doing in a scene so that nobody is caught off guard and nobody is doing anything inappropriate or non-consensual. And you're like, that's such a lovely, wonderful idea. Like, I had no idea that was going on, but once I learned about it, I was like, I'm so glad it's there.
Sure. And I mean, unpopular opinion here, I don't think it's right that we ask actors to do that kind of stuff on screen. Like, it seems like maybe not right or wrong, just like it feels exploitative to like expect these professionals to like, paw on each other and slobber on each other and, for hours on end so that we can watch it. I'm always kind of like, can't you just cut away like in the old days so they don't have to do that? But if they are going to do it, yeah, fantastic that they have a sort of a professional there to kind of like a referee kind of be helping them through that, navigate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm of two minds about it. And I think that's like part of what we're going to get into in the discussion as a general of like sex work and all of that. It was like, it's on the one hand, I certainly don't want young actresses to be pressured into doing nudity. But on the other hand, for the actresses or actors or whomever they are who are comfortable with it. I have, like, it's just a human body. I thought it was fantastic that Emma Thompson went fully bare.
Full Monty.
And was like, this is my body. This is what a woman of my age looks like. And I thought it was, I hate to use the word brave.
I know.
I hate to use that word, but like
it was like
super brave.
Heroic.
I was like, oh, I don't know if I could do it.
I would not do that.
And I've like almost like never had issues with that type of stuff before, but I'm just like, oh, that's a lot. But it was amazing, and the movie definitely didn't need it, but I think was the better for it.
I reckon that's right.
So I think, yeah, it's like context is everything.
True. Let's talk about the use of mirrors.
Yes.
Right? What did the mirror... I mean, I guess the mirrors meant... There's so many, so many usages of mirrors in this film. It's either like one character looking in the mirror by themselves, and then later on the other one will be, and the look will be completely different, and then sometimes they're together looking in the mirror, and that means something else. Just self-image is probably the theme of it.
Well, both of them are playing roles, right?
Yeah.
Very strongly, and that's where the conflict enters in, is because he's playing this role of Leo Grande, and that's his role, and he needs to make sure that it stays a role and is not his true self, and she kind of can't handle that. Yeah. Because what she's trying to do is get out of her role of the, like, dutiful wife, mother, religious education teacher. It was so random. So it's like she's in the process of tearing down her role and then having really poor boundaries around his need to keep his role intact.
And not understanding that his role serves a very different purpose than hers, right? Hers was to, I guess, survive her situation, right? To operate in her situation without making waves at cost of her own happiness. So she needs to work through that. Whereas his role is for sort of professional success and mental health, really. Right. To keep those two, like his job separate from his personal life. I loved the yellow beanie. The first shot, right? Yeah. Is him like sitting in this it's the back of his head, so it's from behind. He's wearing this sort of like really dorky yellow beanie, and he's sitting in a very sort of hunched over, anxious posture. And he removes the beanie and just like almost emerges like a butterfly as Leo, right? Yeah. It was almost like his personal indicator that he was stepping into this role and out of his, I guess, his actual self being Connor. Yeah. Stepping into Leo Grande.
Yeah, the costume design was a bit on the nose. Like, it could have been a little more subtle, the gradations between them in their real clothes and then in their comfortable clothes, and, her in her, like, weird skirt suit thingy.
That skirt. Oh, I could not with that skirt suit.
I did spend a lot of time, unfortunately, like, thinking to myself as I was watching it, like, gee, if I were going to meet a hooker, what would I wear? Like, you couldn't help but, like, put yourself in her shoes and think, like, what decisions you would... I was like, would I bring a nightie? I don't know.
But the fact that she thought to bring a nightie, I was like, oh, wow. And it looked just like her top. Yeah. It was the same print. I was like, oh, find a different accent piece. Like, all right. But yeah, no, you're right. Who am I to judge? If I've never had to dress for such an occasion, I can't judge someone else's choices.
No, I know, but I do sort of judge the director and the costume designer. I felt like it was a little... The change from her, like, the progression of skirt suits to, like, above the knee or to knee length from calf length, and then her in, like, totally in a sweater and relaxed. I was like, this...
It was very apparent. Yeah. Right? You're like, oh, okay. So there's been a character change here. Mm-hmm. There's been a character development because their clothes are different.
But I, on the other side, I would like the lighting coordinator, the lighting team to follow me around everywhere I go. I was like, the lighting was so kind. It wasn't like super obviously soft focus, but it was gentle.
It was forgiving.
Very forgiving.
And oh man, like I guess Emma Thompson is 63, I think I read yesterday. And in most of the shots, she looks great. I guess I figured it was intentional in the sense that you were trying to see how she feels in these moments, in the intimate moments with Leo Grande, when they're in all these different positions and just having an amazing time. She feels really good about herself. She feels really sexy, and that comes off on screen.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I do think like the lighting, to me, like of the cinematic elements, like that's what stood out the most, is like how much the lighting was designed to sort of give her like a subtle glow, or him a subtle glow, or be more harsh at times when, you know, when her prickly personality is coming out. Like I noticed the lighting. I thought they did a good job, and I think they did a lot with it that, unless you were looking for it, which is what we're doing when we're watching these movies versus when we're just sort of like relaxing on the couch.
Okay. On sort of, you know, production notes, shout out to whoever put together all those little towels and other Duffield Hotel paraphernalia around the room. I was like, well done. That, like, you almost convinced me that was a hotel. Yeah.
No, I thought that was good. I will say that, like, my very first note was how much I hated the soundtrack.
Alabama Shakes?
No, just like the like background music in their first meeting. Okay. But honestly, like, I ended it going, I see what they did there. Like, it's actually quite terrible, and it's like the background music in their first meeting is like one step up from elevator music. Like, it's bad until you hit the Alabama Shake song, which was perfection. And then actually the soundtrack changed. Like, it got better and it got more less generic as it went through. So I was like, oh, that was intentional. Good on them. Because I was sitting here thinking, this music is horrible. What music is this? Like, I feel like I'm in an elevator or in the like hotel lobby. Like, this is terrible. So that was a nice touch. Again, there were some things they did with subtlety, and then the costume, I was like, that was too much.
It was right there.
Yeah.
Right there. Yeah.
But I would say in general, like the writing, like you pointed out before, sometimes they did it with subtlety, and then sometimes
it was like, not trying to jump ahead, but yeah, sometimes it was like, sex work is work. And you're like, right, okay, yeah, I figured that's what this was about, but thanks for that.
I will say that I literally screamed when they cut away that first time. Like, they go to get into bed, and then it's, like, cut to the window. And they do that, too. They fake us out twice on that. Which, again, is intentional. It's not until she's finally ready to be seen that you actually see them having sex. But that first time, I was like, wait, what happened? Like, did she have an orgasm? Like, I was totally, like, I was like, oh, that sucked. Like,
Yeah. Up until, like, maybe through 75% of the movie, I wasn't sure if she had the big O yet. So this character has never had an orgasm in her life, and this is like one of her goals, right? But it's not necessary.
No, she won't let it be a goal.
She thinks it won't ever happen. She's like, don't even try. I'm just telling you, I've never had an orgasm. It's not a challenge. And he's like, I didn't take it as one. That's totally, who cares? But in our minds, we're like, girl, you're gonna have an O before this movie is over.
Yes, for sure, 100%. And to that end, like, her faked orgasm was like
hilarious. That was the saddest fake, like Meg Ryan. It was not.
Yeah, like, it's literally like, if we're gonna make a scale between anything and Meg Ryan, that's it, right? Mm-hmm. That's your starting point. Like, I'm like,
that's rock bottom for fake orgasms.
Although then the actual orgasm is quite quiet.
It was, wasn't it? Like, he's across the room and doesn't even know it's happened until it's over.
Yeah. And I did love that they set it up that way.
Why's that?
Because I think that's sort of generally true how it happens for a lot of women who have difficulty having an orgasm. And it's sort of, if you Google these things or watch the talk shows or whatever, like, that's generally the advice that they give you is, like, figure it out for yourself and then teach your partner what works, right? Like,
right on. Yeah.
Right? And it's something that's, like, I think one of the issues with how differently we treat masturbation for women versus men, because no guy ever thinks, like, my first orgasm has to be during sex with a woman. Like, they've already taken care of that, like, years ago, right?
Yep.
So it's, like, not an issue, but a lot of women are sort of culturally pushed in that direction. And so I sort of liked that the ultimate goal was for her to figure out how to please herself, whether or not there was a man there. And I thought that to me, I was like, that was the right way to handle that.
Yeah. It was just so well directed, I thought. Like, the sort of nonverbal cues that they were just really small little ticks or something that they were giving each other and playing off of each other the whole time was just it felt so real.
It did.
So it was everything, like, their connection felt very believable through that.
Agreed. Yeah. And again, in terms of, like, the awkward moments were damn awkward.
So awkward.
Yeah, like, the tender moments were very tender. Like, all of it, I was there for all the ride. And I definitely, like, felt like, it's sexy in parts, too, right? It needs to be. And it's, like, I definitely felt like I was whipsawing through emotions through the whole thing. It was very effective in that sense, yeah.
So, question.
Yes.
Everything I've read by the director and Emma Thompson, they insist there is no romance in this movie, right?
Yep.
I was picking up romantic feelings from her at one point, or at least, like, sort of possessive infatuation feelings. Did you pick up on that? Did you read that? Did you read it that way, is what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think we were meant to read that aspect of it. I think what they were trying to say was, like, and I knew this going in and I was fine going out, like, there was no point where I ever wanted this to translate into real life or that they were going to end up together or fall in love.
Right. Okay.
Right. Or that he was definitely never going to fall in love with her. Mm-hmm. Right. And I thought that was great. Like, this wasn't Pretty Woman. We were never going to get a Pretty Woman ending.
Right.
But to that point, I'm curious about your thoughts. So I didn't feel like she ever fell in love with him so much as she needed to feel like they were making a real connection in order to justify what she was doing. Because she was still had a problem in her head that she had hired a sex worker and it was easier for her to feel okay about it if she could pretend that there was something real there. That was my interpretation.
I like that. No, I like that a lot. And maybe this might be a good segue into that aspect of the film, is that she starts out, they're in two different places. He's coming in, I am a professional. This is a service. I am good at what I do. And we have agreed on a price. And I have no shame about this, just as I wouldn't if I were performing any other service for somebody on a freelance basis. Let's do this. And her feeling is very much, I feel very dirty. You're being exploited. You're being demeaned. She keeps saying, like, don't you feel exploited? Don't you feel demeaned? And he's like, nope. And what she's really confessing is, I am exploiting you. I am demeaning you. I don't respect you. I don't respect what you do. And I am purchasing you as a piece of flesh is what I'm doing. And that's why she feels bad, because that's where she's coming from. Yeah.
And I think the movie really captured a lot of this sort of, like, I remember sitting there thinking, like, I don't know if I would ever have the guts to do it.
Which end?
To hire somebody. Were I in her position?
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe someday I could be in a similar position. I could be an older woman on my own. Like, who knows where life will take us. And I did think it was very I thought it was interesting that the reason that he was like, you look fine. You could, if you really just wanted to have a hookup, like you could do that. And she's like, those men are old. Right. I was like, ooh.
I respected that honesty.
I did too. I really did. And
I hear you.
And I was like, I think that were that a male character, we would have felt differently about it, and I don't let her off the hook for that. But there's an honesty there. And I just remember, I couldn't help but think, like, God, would I have the guts to do this if it were me? And I'm like, I don't think I would. And if I did, I would be her, and I'd be, like, going back and forth in my head while it was actually happening. Like, I think I would just be so uncomfortable with it. And I think her discomfort with the situation is as much at issue as his lack of it, right? Like, again, this is something men do. Men hire prostitutes. There are places where it's legal. There are red light districts. This is a somewhat accepted part of society. Like,
oldest profession in the world.
Right. How do we feel about it when a woman does it? And how do we feel about it when the sex worker is male?
I mean, I don't feel any differently about it. I don't know if I would be too afraid to do it myself. Not because, like, I do not associate any shame necessarily with it, right? Like, if everyone is in a safe place and everyone's respecting boundaries and all terms are agreed upon, great. Like, if it's legal where you live, power to you.
Sure.
I would be afraid that I would inadvertently fall into what she falls into, which is, I don't see how I couldn't develop feelings or some kind of connection with that kind of physical intimacy. We're wired to do that. We're wired to squirt out oxytocin in our brains every time we're physically intimate with somebody. Like, how could you not bond with someone after repeated physical encounters?
Interesting.
But maybe some people can. Do you see a difference with the genders reversed?
Yes and no. I sent you an article where somebody gave the movie a very negative review. They had brought up the issue of sex tourism for women. Apparently, this is a thing that happens in Jamaica. I did not realize that.
I'm familiar with it.
Oh, you are?
Not necessarily Jamaica, but I've she kind of referred to them as rent boys, which is more of a British term, right? But and that would be what they would say in Jamaica. But I observed it in Costa Rica, which is also in the Caribbean, culturally speaking. And they had a word, cazafortunas.
Okay.
Which is basically like gold digger or rent boy. And I saw that happen a lot. And there were a lot of women from the States and Canada who thought they were in a relationship. But I mean, that relationship started right off the bat with them beginning to pay that guy's rent and all his utilities and sending him, a certain allowance every month and da-da-da-da-da. And I mean, it happened all the time. And so when I would visit Costa Rica, and on the very first day, 5 guys would come up to me and be like, hey, where are you from? And I'm like, I ain't got no money. Leave me alone.
I'm not rich enough to be your sugar mama.
Right.
Look away.
You're barking up the wrong tree,
Wow.
But I saw that a lot. And so I thought that was, whoa, I forget what publication that was now, but
I don't remember.
Sure. But I thought it was fair. I thought it was a fair read of the beginning of the movie. I thought it was unfair not to acknowledge that they actually did grapple with that as the film went along. Like, he challenges her on that. Like, it bubbles up. Like, at one point, I think I've already said, she says, like, oh, I feel bad that I've purchased you. And he went, let's clear that up. You have not purchased me. Like, sorry, was that?
Yeah.
Let's be clear. And she does act like she owns him. Like, when she goes in and looks up his personal information after he set that boundary. And
I mean, it's extremely inappropriate, and it's played as extremely inappropriate and I guess almost unforgivable. But I mean, there was a moment where you, like, well, me in the audience and he and you're like, oh God, like, what's going to happen next? Is she going to show up at his house? Like,
sure.
I mean, when you cross that boundary, like, all of us, and I think particularly women, start to think, like, what's the escalation on this one, right? So that gender matters because you're sort of like, my experience is not that a man crosses a boundary and then you're like, that's bad, and he argues with you and lets it go, right? It's like, what more boundaries does he start to transgress?
Yeah.
So that's a terrifying moment. Mm-hmm. So, I feel like the most naive person on the planet because I had no idea this was going on in other countries. But whatever. I think that, so the way the lens I sort of took on it and the approach that I was thinking in my head where he's like, you're paying for a service. So I think, number one, you cannot divorce the gender issue. Gender reversal movies work best when there is something worth exploring about what's different in the scenario when it's a man and a woman, and then when it's a woman and a man, right? Like, so the article, which I'll post in the show notes, had said, like, if this was an older man and a younger woman, we would all have been appalled. And I was like,
well, there isn't a, millennia-old power dynamic shifting in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah. I was like, is it not obvious that that's the difference? Yeah. Right. I was like, that's the difference. I was like, if it was a much older, say, gay man who had been married, never had an orgasm because he had lived repressed his entire life. Okay, so that would have been man, probably, like who he would have used as a sex worker still, or hired, I should say. That would we have had a same problem with it? No, we wouldn't. It's like context matters. And the gender context absolutely matters. So I was a little frustrated by that complaint. So I will say one, and point one, no, gender and context matters. Mm-hmm. Point two, there are a lot of professions, like nurse, home health aide. There are a lot of professions caring professions, where those lines get blurred.
I was thinking therapist.
Okay.
The whole time. Right? Like, a therapist could be accused of acting like your friend only as long as you pay them to listen to you talk, right? But that's not fair. They are a skilled professional. They're offering you the service that no one else can. That doesn't have that, training and experience. And you're paying them for their skill, their experience, their time, and the value they bring through that service, right? But that's considered completely legitimate, even though if you did stop paying them, they wouldn't keep being your friend.
Right.
But you still have to build a connection with them for it to be effective.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think, again, across the medical field, that can be true. And so I thought, there are plenty of sex workers who've come out and said, I'm not exploited. I do this by choice. I'm good at this job. I make a great salary. Like, please, can we just treat this as a profession like any other profession? And the fact that those people exist does not detract from the fact that there are plenty of people who are exploited, who are sex trafficked. One is not an argument to say that the other doesn't exist.
100%.
But that's the thing. Just because there are exploited trafficked people doesn't mean that everybody who is a sex worker feels that way about the services that they provide.
As you say that, I'm almost thinking about marriage in general. The institution of marriage, for a long time, resulted in, and still does result in a whole lot of domestic abuse.
Right.
That doesn't mean no one should get married.
Right.
I don't feel like I am qualified to promote one stance or another on this. I can only sort of just hear people out and sort of respect their feelings and their experiences and their thoughts on it. Yeah,
I mean, and I think the movie handled this a bit ham-handedly, but, there was a point of like, well, legalization would certainly help protect the people who are in this industry because this is a job that they feel is a job that they would like to have versus the people who are in it involuntarily and all that stuff. So, like, they very sort of it didn't come out great. That's like, yeah, I mean, I'm for legalized crime of all, you know, like that's my platform, legalized crime.
Like, legalized crime.
So,
if we learned anything from Prohibition, it was that you should legalize all crime. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think then, and you know, so sort of back to the gender difference, like, and again, I don't know what all men do with sex workers, that's fine, but like he sort of talks about like, you know, sometimes they just hold their hand or we just like cuddle in bed and like.
My favorite. I thought of you. I was like, Nicole might ask someone to do this.
Well, no, actually, so if you couldn't see, she made little cat ears at me. Like he describes at one point that someone just has him like dress up like a cat and sit there
and ignore him.
And I'm literally like looking at the cat sacked out on my lap.
Right. Like I do get this for free.
Free, yeah. No, well, it ain't free.
Right.
But you know, like how much emotional labor he has to do with her to get her to a point where they can even do anything physical.
Yeah.
And you're like, that is different. That is an aspect of this job that is gendered, that doesn't go away. I mean, maybe it could. I hope it could.
Sure. Yeah, there were lots of aspects of it, watching it, that I was drawing sort of connections to just general freelance, positions, services. When he, as someone who used to design websites on a freelance basis, I picked up on the notion of her handing him, the professional, the expert, this list of things that she thought they should do during their time. And he kind of responds like, basically says, why don't you let me tell you what you need? Because I am the professional here, and you don't need to do 6 different sexual acts you've never done before in the span of 2 hours. You need to chat for a bit. Yeah. And you need to dance with me for a bit. Yeah. And you need to like become comfortable in your body, and then maybe we should meet again. And that's so, that just rang true for me so much, as someone who was like, no, you don't need that, all caps, underline, italic, bold, Comic Sans headline on your website. Why don't you let me tell you what you need on your website? I think you'll be a lot happier and you'll get your money's worth,
Yeah, no, that's really funny. I never thought of it that way. I did think of a dear friend who has been working in a grocery store through an unfortunate out of unemployment, and she jokes that she's like, oh, working in a grocery store is like being a bartender. Like, I hear everybody's problems.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, like, that's why and how the term emotional labor was coined, right?
I've never heard that before. It's really
I thought it's super. Yeah, I was surprised as well. So I mean, I do think that there's so much emotional labor that goes into that job, and I did think like that's probably not something a female sex worker would necessarily have.
Sure. Although I have heard in like, I've seen lots of movies where that's a thing.
Yeah. And I say that I'm like, but I could be really wrong on that front. That's fair. But ultimately, I mean, the movie's statement is that sex work is positive for the people who sell it and for the people who buy it.
Sure. It's definitely a treatise in favor of legalizing sex work and respecting sex work as a caring in quotes profession. And I think one of his lines is actually quite convincing, where he says like, what if you have, an issue, like a medical issue or a mental issue, and you can't connect with people easily, or you can't, whatever you have, or you have a situation about a circumstance that keeps you from organically fostering these encounters. This is where sex work is for those people too.
Yeah, and I thought, I mean, I was a little disappointed in that. I was like, I mean, what if you've got a weird kink?
There you go. Yep.
I mean, there's dominatrixes, like there's that whole community where a lot of that is paid sex work. And I'm like, what if your wife is like, I don't want to smack you on the bottom, but I'm okay for you paying to get that from somebody else. Like, I kind of wish the movie had pushed those boundaries a little bit more. And I did think that there was a weird disconnect with, they're different enough issues that I was a little unhappy with the portrayal of, there are plenty of sex positive people who do have concerns that are often legitimate around sex work, and I thought it was a little unfair to paint, I guess from the larger perspective of the film, it, like, you know, all the feminists who protest porn, like, it sort of painted them into a non-sex positive, body positive corner. And I'm like, I don't think that's fair to those people who feel that their point isn't that we don't respect sex. Their point is that sex is exploitation. And you can choose to disagree with that point, but it sort of just painted them all as, like, no fun hags, which, you know, that's sort of the life of being a feminist in general, is getting painted as a no fun hag. So there you go. But I kind of was like, I think they needed to tread a little bit more carefully into how we think about the people who are anti-sex work.
I think that's totally valid. Yeah. And if maybe the film would have been a little slightly more, would have more sort of be more convincing if they had approached that aspect of things. Like they kind of quickly blow past it. And like, I guess it is, she says at one point, I guess it is more dangerous for women, isn't it? And he's like, yeah, it can be, but I've been slapped around. And then they move on. Whereas they could have been more, explored the other aspects of sex trafficking and those very, very legitimate concerns that of all the sort of nastiness and brutality that comes and exploitation that comes with that industry, that illegal industry as it is right now.
Right. And again, to not say that, and to the point where you're like, now that you're like, oh, now that I understand sexual positivity and body positivity, I'm totally on board with sex work. Like, again, that may not happen, and you might have reasons, whether any of us agree or disagree with it. Mm-hmm. Like, there are legitimate reasons why people fear and are uncomfortable with sex work or porn or all of those things. Yeah. So, any final thoughts on the movie?
Oh gosh. Yeah, no, just in general, I'd say it's worth watching. How about that? It's worth watching.
So to that end, social impact score, 1, worst movie. No, and this is like, again, it's so hard to do these social impact scores without box office.
Right.
Right. But between 1 and 10.
I mean, to your point, I guess it was kind of a film festival darling.
Okay.
Right. In the last season of those indie film festivals. It's gotten a lot of coverage. A lot of people can see it on Hulu.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, maybe I'll give it a very optimistic 6. Let's say that a lot of people see it and it becomes almost like maybe even Leo Grande, the name, becomes synonymous with, you know, a sex positive sex work experience. Who knows? It could change some minds.
Yeah.
Or not.
Yeah. I'm sort of right there with like a 5 or a 6. Definitely. I don't know. It just, I feel really hamstrung without knowing sort of the popularity of these things. It's
and the streamers will never tell.
No, they will not. And I am just, it really makes it hard to give a score for these movies, as does, again, knowing how much people go back and listen to old episodes, and I'm like, oh god, we're just like horrible at this. Like, everyone's gonna listen to our social impact score 5 years later and be like, well, they were totally wrong. Yeah.
Wrong.
Yeah. All right. Recommendations?
You know, I would, the whole time I was thinking of the original film, The Girlfriend Experience.
Okay.
Directed by the same guy that did all the Ocean's 11 movies. I can't remember.
Steven Soderbergh.
Thank you. Directed by Steven Soderbergh. It's actually a really nice film, and it kind of explores a lot of the same themes. So, and it is from a woman, a cisgender woman, sex worker. So you can see the flip side of this as well. and how that plays out from that experience.
Cool. I am going to recommend The Sessions. It's based on a true story. And it is about a man in an iron lung who's in his late 30s who hires a sex therapist to have sex for the first time.
Oh.
And it was very hard not just to like preview this, but it really gets into the idea of Leo's point of like, what if you're somebody who has no access to sex?
Yeah.
What if you live in an institution? What if you are so physically disabled? Mm-hmm. So, and she is a sex worker, but she's a sex therapist, which casts an air of legitimacy around what she's doing, which I think is frankly unwarranted in a lot of situations, right? Like, her legitimacy is no more or no less than a lot of other people's. Having said that, like, I think working with disabled populations, there's a reason why.
Sure.
Anyway.
Sure. It's very complicated.
It's complicated. So, well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Check us out on Facebook. Get ready for the next movie. I'm trying to post what we're doing next so you have a chance to go see it. And remember, movies matter.
And so do you.
We'll see you next time.